nothing but Star Wars. Give me the Star Wars. Don't let them end.
Bienvenidos, worldwide fans of the galaxy far, far away. Hottest entertainment with an edge. Jaime En Fuego here, stoked to welcome you to my namesake program, Enfuegotainment. That is right, you can just call me Fuego for short, and I am so stoked to have you here for more of my Year of 19 complete canon coverage. I have been making my way monthly through all of the films in chronological, not released order, but in timeline order in the Star Wars universe. So I have finished the prequels, I have also done the Clone Wars film, and I'm making my way through the Clone Wars television series, but I've also been going through the books in timeline order as well. And ironically enough, the first three that I have read are three books that all came out this past year. So I did Master and Apprentice, which was done by Claudia Gray, and then I also did the Dooku novel, which was apparently audiobook only, but now I just got done with Star Wars Queen's Shadow. Now, this was written by E.K. Johnston, who got a lot of positive marks for writing the Ahsoka book, which I have yet to get to. And yeah, interesting, just not as much a book for me, I guess I could probably say. However, I did find a large amount of merit in this. And so, yes, this book essentially takes place between episode 1 and episode 2. So Amidala, Ms. Padme, is about to step down as Queen of Naboo, and lo and behold, she is asked by the new Queen, and kind of coerced by Chancellor Palpatine as well, to become a senator. So just shift from, you know, just strictly world politics on her home planet and go out to Coruscant and actually become a part of this, you know, this to Republic, you know, Senate, whatever you want to classify it as. It has many names, you find out with all the prequel politics. And, you know, it's not even so much that this is a book that I feel in some ways is written for female young adults, and so I didn't, like, relate as much, because there is a lot of interesting prequel politics in here, but it is the fact that very little goes down action-wise throughout the entirety of this, and so it does have slow points very similar to Master and Apprentice, and some of the subplots are just not as enticingly intriguing. But if you really want to get just some interesting backstory and stuff that's never really been discussed that much, you know, between those first two episodes of the prequels, I mean, it is fascinating to that degree. And, you know, that's because, as we find out in the prequels, especially in episode 2, you know, when one of them dies, that, yeah, Padme had lots of stand-ins for her, because of the fact that when you're in a position of power like that, and you know, with all of the upheaval of things with the Trade Federation and stuff going down, yeah, her life was in danger, and so she needed these stand-ins, she needed these protectors, and we get to know one very well by the name of Sabe in this. And so as you know, Padme is making this transition and, you know, heading from Naboo to Coruscant and everything, she decides that she is not only going to take, you know, Sabe with her, but a few of the handmaidens are going along on their ways, but then others are coming with her, you know? And so, yeah, she gets out there and she's just immediately blown away by how, first and foremost, there's so much to learn, but also that she is being judged, and there is just all kinds of, like, chatter, and she's being besmirched by certain people. There is an attempt on her life initially as well, like shortly after she gets out there. But much to the chagrin of Palpatine, she starts forging alliances with Mothma, with, you know, Mr. NYPD Blue himself, Jimmy Smits, but yes, I mean, you know, Senator Organa. And so it's just interesting how some of the loose ends are tied up with the fact that Padme sends Sabe on this mission to Tatooine to try to save some slaves. So that is actually a similar plot thread that we got in Master and Apprentice, where, you know, it's about just trying to do away with slavery in the galaxy, and yet how much a part it is of so many of these planets' economies. And it's kind of wacky that that's a through line here. But this book also came out here in 2019. This came out in March. I can't remember offhand when Master and Apprentice came out, but it's also this same year. And so both of those do share some of those prequel, you know, politic aspects and stuff, and how it was a hot topic around this particular time in the galaxy far, far away. And so yeah, we get, Sabe going to Tatooine, and as she is trying to rescue all of these slaves, one in particular, and one reason why Padme sends her there is because she is trying to find Annie's mother and rescue her and have her be one of the slaves that's taken out of Tatooine. And so that's an interesting plot thread as well. Padme actually goes at the behest of Senator Organa and tours Alderaan and meets his wife, who is the queen there, and we hear about her dilapidated physical state, and that's really fascinating. And so, I mean, really, in some ways, you have the interesting just maturing of Padme in this, and just becoming a woman and just stepping away from this childhood kind of ruler that she was, and just seeing the bigger scope and scale of everything else. But there is just the ghost of the events in The Phantom Menace does hang over this book, in the fact that there's still people who disagree how she massively militarized Naboo after the events of that fight with the Trade Federation and all of those droids, at the end of episode 1. And, there is mentions of Qui-Gon and how she, just mourns his death and everything. And so, I mean, really, even if it is more so about, certain flirtiness at times between, Sabe and this guy who she's kind of romping around with, and who's, I'm trying to remember if he's a former pilot or not. That's the one thing I have to say, is that whereas I crushed Master and Apprentice with the quickness, this one, despite being significantly shorter, I want to say it's only over 300 pages, 300 and some change, just based on subject matter, this was a little bit more of a slog for me to get through. But that doesn't mean it was bad. It just, once again, doubles down the fact that I don't necessarily know how intended it was for me. But as far as just really interesting insight, and I mean, just the arguments, and it's not even so much arguments, the debates that Amidala has, with Mothma, they're really interesting, honestly, and how they just have different viewpoints about how to approach just the coming storm that is already kind of brewing, and the fact that Organa and Mothma are already kind of moving some pieces, just kind of behind the scenes to brace themselves for. I mean, they don't honestly understand the full scale of what is going to eventually happen in the events of Revenge of the Sith and whatnot. But they still just kind of they smell trouble afoot, and they as the unrest rises, and as certain planets are turning to, and just people from planets instead of entire planets turning to being pirates and things like that, because they're they don't have enough water for their crops, and then in turn they don't have enough food, and so how else are you going to feed your families on your planet if you don't turn to these nefarious means and stuff like that. So really, yes, very prequel, politic heavy, but if you're a fan of the Amidala character, you want more of just the aspect of her switching places with people. Very often we go back to Naboo and we meet her family, we meet her parents, we meet her sister. I mean, there is a lot of cool stuff in here if you're just a fan of the character and you really want to learn more about just, her personal just convictions and insight and friendship amongst her handmaidens, and those that help with her attire, her makeup, all of these different things, and just the close kinship and love that they have forged together. It's fascinating, and if you really dig that sort of prequel political stuff, which I still feel is represented more compellingly here than George did in the actual prequels themselves. I feel like did so much of the Legends stuff did a solid job as well, but in all of the new canon stuff since the Disney acquisition, I do really feel like books like this to a lesser degree, but also Master and Apprentice, they put forth ideas of just some of the disagreements. I do feel like Master and Apprentice did do it in a more sophisticated manner, because they didn't necessarily in that book paint the Jedi Order as being completely squeaky clean, and they showed even dissension in those ranks and stuff. And so, I don't know, I also did listen to some of the audiobook, and once again, on Scribd, because, they've got pretty much all the Star Wars books on there, so that actually helped me kind of pick back up interest when I was, falling behind on this at one particular point, and that's because The voice acting is done quite well by our reader, and you do have the sound effects, and you do have, you know, just different voices being used for different characters and stuff. But really, at the end of the day, this book is very much about the relationship between Sabe, you know, who is essentially like her stand-in slash bodyguard of sorts, and Padme, and the, you know, love that they you know, shared together, and almost like sisterhood of sorts and stuff. And so all the little, you know, the hormones at times that we get from certain characters and the tensions and, you know, things of that nature, I mean, they're not at the forefront though. So even if you are a man in his 30s like I am, I mean, it's just like, it's like, look, I do still feel like, even though this is a YA book, there's a lot of very interesting stuff that you can get about the galaxy far, far away that is in this. And I am going to give just a brief spoiler warning right here, because there's an epilogue, and so I'm going to give a thumbs up right now because I'm shifting in the spoilers, and then when I shift out of them, I will give another thumbs up. Give me just at least a minute or so if you just want to fast forward through. So, all right, here we go. So there is a very interesting epilogue here in the fact that there's a time jump that transpires, and so the time jump actually jumps all the way to Padme's funeral, and it's Sabe, you know, and just, I mean, it basically just jumps right into her just looking at the stillness of her body, and it's just very sad, and she's just mourning the loss of her friend, and yeah, Padme Amidala was completely still. The brown halo of her hair spread out around her, softened here and there by white blossoms that had blown through the air to find their rest amongst her curls. Her skin was pale and perfect, her face was peaceful, her eyes were closed, and her hands were clasped across her stomach as she floated. Naboo carried on without her. Even now, at the end, she was watched. And it's just a very sad scene that's described at the very end. And I mean, Sabe is just trying to make sense of it all, and she's just like, man, you know, presumably, at least in her estimation, she's like, Obi-Wan Kenobi is dead. You know, she goes through all this listing. Anakin Skywalker is dead. All these people are dead. You know, Padme's dead. And she's like, what are we going to do next? You know, what exactly can be done? And then at the very end, she gets a transmission from Senator Organa. And obviously, if you know this stuff, you know what that transmission was going to be about a surviving child, and, you know, what has to be done with her. And so I want that story. I want more of this, actually. The epilogue did leave me really curious about how much more of that, you know, Organa slash Sabe, you know, pairing for protection of this child we could, you know, possibly hear about in a different story later on. So we are out of spoiler territory now, everybody. And so, yes, at the end of the day, you know, by E.K. Johnston, also author of Ahsoka, Star Wars Queen's Shadow. It's fascinating, you know? Once again, I didn't feel at times as much that it was meant for me, but I still really took a lot out of it. And if you're into the prequels, I'm not a prequelist per se, but I've really grown to appreciate that time in the galaxy far, far away. And I don't know, even if it did take me a little ways to, a little bit more time than normal to actually get through it. So, I have been Jaime En Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube for Enfuegotainment. You can find reviews that I already did this past year of the Dooku novel, or audiobook I should say, because I don't know if that one is even getting a print release, but also the Claudia Gray Master and Apprentice. That was fantastic. It is a pre-episode 1 story that is all about Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and you know, some jewel smugglers and stuff, and prequel politics. Once again, you know, the slavery connection that this one has. But yeah, it's a fascinating read, especially just hearing about the differing ideals between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and you know, reading the prophecies of old, and, you know, we get some cool Dooku backstory there too. And so yeah, that is definitely my favorite of the 3 reads that have been released this year. But yes, next up, I'm actually going to check out Dark Disciple as I'm finishing the Clone Wars television series. There's going to be some reviews coming of the Clone Wars television series. I also have done a revisit of Rogue One, and I published a kind of a vintage spoiler extended discussion about the Solo film. But I actually am thinking I want to check out that Solo expanded, because that's the thing, upon a review, Solo did kind of grow on me, I must say. And in some ways, I liked it better than The Last Jedi. I don't hate that film as much as a lot of people do, but it's going to be interesting revisiting that one before The Rise of Skywalker comes out this December. And yeah, how about those Sith Troopers, right? So anyway, lots of other cool stuff to check out here, Star Wars related, on my channel, as well as film reviews of various stuff that has come out most recently. Boy, The Lion King is coming this weekend. I've most recently done reviews for Stuber, for, lots of other stuff this past year. Booksmart, yesterday. Yes, it's where I cover stuff that's not of the spooktacular variety, which is what I do on The Horror Show, youtube.com/The Horror Show channel. If you like spooktacular stuff, that is where I love to present it and be a part of the process with producer, host, and showrunner creator Cecil Laird, along with my girls, Marsha Parker and Susie Von Slaughter. We do at least one episode a day, sometimes two, depending on if the circumstance presents itself. So we're talking trailer reactions, reviews of movies, books, comics, television stuff, convention coverage, unboxings, you name it, video game let's plays, all kinds of cool stuff. And then also, every Monday evening, you can see me 6 p.m. Pacific Standard, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Will Iscredia YouTube channel for a show called Show Business, #ShowBusiness. And yes, it's where we basically break down the weekend box office numbers, both domestically and internationally, and look ahead at some of the week's stories and films that are about to be coming out. So that is going to be about the end of it, everybody. So I guess I'm going to give my typical sign off and say until the real of Ka comes around once more, and that doesn't really pertain to this being a book and all, but hey, whatever, roll with it here, peeps. But yes, I am hopeful that we get to share more palaver about Star Wars sooner rather than later, and until then, you know the drill. May the Force be with you.